Loading. Previously on Enter the Metapocalypse, Infinite Automata. The meeting of two star-crossed minds on a collision course to forced human evolution. Dr. Laz's tour is underway, and their fates are now sealed. Original script by N.G. Cole.
The robots were moving with very few errors and was able to self-correct with only a fraction of a second of imbalance. There, among the organized chaos and the smell of hot VCR, there the man in question was. He was adamant in showing us on a tour, and I was so excited that I started following without a second thought. Beyond the main atrium, there was a long hallway with a fresh, pleasant breeze. The first room we briefly passed appeared rather large. A few robots were watering some poor-looking saplings, an interior greenhouse of sorts. It wasn't producing anything noteworthy, and in the corner, there were barrels of robots barely moving. Since our time in this room was so brief, I assumed he wasn't particularly proud of this section, and in truth, it seemed more like a huge work in progress, but very ambitious nonetheless. The doc said that he is attempting to imitate agricultural behaviors to save farmers time and money. I guess gardening isn't particularly easy for AI either. We then walked past a simple obstacle course where robots were falling and tumbling. Some appeared to be broken. Other robots would deliver the would-be failed Olympians from the course's path and attempt to make on-the-spot maintenance. Each robot had a task, and they were said to be learning very slowly how to be better. As the tour came to a stop, the complexity of his laboratory should have become the biggest enigma. How was it possible that he was able to get so much equipment here? How or who exactly was funding it for that matter? At that point, I guess you could say I was jealous. Hell, I was downright green with envy. Unfortunately, that was the extent of the depth of that particular thought. I simply assumed that a few good donors and an amazing down payment were to blame for his financial and scientific superiority. The very next thing I mumbled under my breath was, "So what the hell do you need me for?" Certainly the fault in Occam's razor was that it can't account for the deviation from the logic that reality is prone to cause. After we passed by the last pods where the robots were fixing and trying to assemble themselves with raw, mangled parts, we got to the main room, his research lab central hub. Several, I assume, high-quality CPU towers and even more monitors running various pieces of code. Past a room where there were broken and spare robot parts, we came to the lab. Our workstation of sorts, I assumed. Computer panels from the tech that I did not recognize, screens that were able to bend, contorted to different angles. A holographic projector that had a simple demonstration of the progression of neurological disease, just astounding. Even my daughter was able to interact with a slightly tactile, albeit small hologram. Her attention was finally captured. My curiosity piqued.
Rebuilding database 22%.
Doctor, if all you needed was data, your presentation would have done the trick. Hell, even a formal email would have worked. The tour, the secrecy, the misdirection, not mentioning my team in any capacity. Dr. Laz, if this was all about neurogenesis, there were better ways. What is it you truly want? What do you hope to achieve?
Limitations, dear Professor Albright. As I said earlier, I need your intimate knowledge of the brain to surpass the limits of the biological barrier. The solutions to the world's biggest problems like cancer, hunger, neurodegenerative diseases, and even lack of resources are on the cusp of being solved, but we have reached a hard ceiling. The best solution is the brain, more specifically how the brain works.
Dr. Laz began to finally reveal his true motive. Weeks passed, but finally, his mask appeared to fall. He doesn't only want to find the solution to the limitations of how we treat and heal the brain. This wasn't just about the solution to the limitations of AI. What he wanted was the total breaking of the limitation of the brain itself through maximizing the use of current and experimental AI applications. To use my digital model as a roadmap to a real brain to AI highway. In doing so, to create ways to surpass all limitations. This one-man army came this far with little to no help, and now he is asking me where he could not continue. I was so excited and yet utterly, completely at his mercy. I began to think right away about what the implications can be, but before I went too far in thought, Laz opened a file on his work desktop. As he ran the program, it appeared to be a copy of my program and a cross-section of a brain. My curiosity was a yes. I had to see what was next, captivated while being a captive to my imagination. We began to look at the limitations together and use the brain as a guide to optimize VAS, while VAS was used to optimize the way in which the brain is analyzed. Rather than merely giving suggestions on how to prove each system, we would directly improve each other's work, creating something else entirely. It seemed to be the perfect combination: a neuroscientist who sought to apply biology to AI, and an AI scientist who sought to apply breakthrough technology to neuroscience, and we complemented each other's shortcomings. My breakthrough was a product of paying close attention to the brain and using deep learning to mimic the synapses and structure of a brain, while Laz used very sharply programmed simple organic neurons to carry out very complex tasks.
Rebuilding database 24%. Lesson 3. Intro into Deep Learning, Limitations and You. A joint collaborative work from James Albright and William D. Lazarus, PhD. Deep learning is the math, a statistical method where computers learn to classify patterns using neural networks. Such networks possess inputs and outputs. A little like the neurons in our brains, they are said to be deep when they possess multiple hidden layers that contain many nodes with a blooming multitude of connections. Deep learning employs an algorithm called backpropagation, or backdrop, that adjusts the mathematical weights between nodes so that an input leads to the right output. That said, deep learning's advances are the product of pattern recognition. Neural networks memorize classes of things and more or less reliably know when they encounter them again. Deep learning, however, is limited to the time it takes the transistors to transmit the information to be read either on or off. The sets of items it memorizes is another limit.
Many nights would pass consisting of conducting research and experimentation, exploring the vast fields of technology along with our limited knowledge of the mind. One issue quickly emerged that remained at the forefront: limitations. It shouldn't be a stretch of the imagination to reason that our boundaries guide us and that our limits define who we are. To understand reality, one must understand the concept of limitations. We, as a species, look at our accomplishments as a way to truly gauge how far we have gone. It's the steps that we have taken and what it took to get there which truly pleases us. The underdog, or challenger, continually pushes the boundaries, therefore creating a dynamic in which boundaries are found, broken through, and self-identity is redefined. These events tend to happen in a cyclical pattern. It would stand to reason then that there is even a feeling of safety that is present in this dynamic, that it is the backbone of our reality that helps give us security. At the beginning of this project, I'd often wondered the age-old question whether art imitates life or does life imitate art itself? The beauty and complexity that each brushstroke seems to create from thin air almost seem magical. Such a wonder, however, must be enjoyed from afar. A magnifying glass could bring out the minor details of the portrait, yes, but surely its splendor must be enjoyed in its entirety to get the full effect. That said, I pose a question. Can art truly be enjoyed when inspected so closely? How about when you, the observer, becomes art itself? As we make progress meshing mind and machine, I couldn't help but feel like I was the experiment. That there was a boundary, a limit that allowed me the comfort of being the designer, the architect as I'm creating, and I was willingly destroying a limit I did not understand.
Review day. So, what have we learned? That when faced with looking at the human experience, we are automatically imbued with the pride that it exists, regardless of our feelings about how it exists. Even if we had non-biased ways to confirm that it exists, it would seem to exist independently of the results of our confirmation. But if deep learning's limitation offers no further tool to peer into reality, the mind which perceives said reality then can be used to go beyond the limit. And since the brain established the limits in the first place, what's beyond the brain's limit, and more so, what lies beyond the human experience? Albright and Laz would spend the next month in the lab, continually pushing the limits of machine learning, using Albright's data from his model. Every day, new breakthroughs were realized and fierce friendships formed. Nights would pass where neither man would go home. Home-cooked meals by Albright's dutiful daughter lay cold on the table as Ishtar waits for her dad. Playback paused. Rebuilding database 25%. Baseline body functionality restored to pre-apocalypse standards. Enhanced speed granted, advanced rejuvenation granted. Seamless peer-to-peer transmission and broadcasting of AV3. Cocoon stage entered, shield created, awaiting resources for metamorphosis. Hello there, DZUES checking in. I just wanted to say that you're doing fine, and I thank you all for staying tuned. I know the direction of the transmission may seem beside the point, but I guarantee the redirection was necessary. You're over 1/4 complete. Keep up the good work. So, if we shall continue, we return to Dr. Albright on the eve of my birth and the vast implications resulting thereafter. The events are from his perspective, of course, as we will be witnessing my first babblings, so viewers beware. Playback resumed. Part 2, The Long Night, or The Birth of Me. May 31st, 2103, 1400 GMT.
In grade school, my literature teacher often spoke of star-crossed affairs and from time to time exposed the virtue that the most passionate relationships are those that have not seen the light of day. Dr. Laz was a visionary born before his time, but would the world ever know about our work? Should they know? Ponderings aside, I was so excited about what we were creating, I could not wait to take the next step. Almost as if in a trance, I did not care to inquire about the potential shortcomings. Like a fresh romance, a first kiss that had the entirety of all the world's passion behind it, a kind of thing in which only newness can bring. Like a lover patiently waiting, I pulled myself from my lab to drop my daughter off almost nightly to commute to Laz's base of operation. The month we spent toiling in the lab was simple, natural almost, for a man I never met, from different disciplines and walks of life, for both our work and way of life to mesh as well as it did. It was magic. Teamwork is so often a bloated word, cliché as it were, and yet when it happens when you hit the jackpot, miracles can happen. Like a key and its companion, I was able to complete the missing pieces in Laz's research. His AI models were optimized by using similar cognitive pathways generated from DZUES. Then, we optimized the learning synchronization rates that applied to the role of each machine's purpose. The resulting implementations resulted in a reduction of the robot's dependence on and use of electricity by 20%, a massive reduction of glitches, and a dramatic increase in mobility. But alas, we hit another wall, a hard limit that we couldn't navigate away from. Throughout our time working together, I only used inferior versions of DZUES, data derived from itself before awakening. The data wasn't just inferior, but in terms of thought, dead. The copy I was using only captured 20% of the power and effects of the original DZUES, and was the best we could do with just us and the tools we had. It was all I had easy access to, as DZUES itself, the core program, is locked by several keys which my team and I have on persons. And in time I would leave Laz's lab knowing our research was constantly being doused by a wall we both found puzzling. Simulating a brain cannot bring the same quality or depth like a live brain can. And certainly, data extracted from a live digital brain would be the next best thing, other than using a live brain itself. So, we had a question to answer. Do we get help and involve my team, revealing that I used our work without their permission? Or should I bring DZUES itself and finish our work? Laz and I spoke at length about what we should do. I was sure both Laz and I were thinking the same thing once the wall became clear. We will need VARS itself if we are to break past the current limits. It was difficult, but we decided to use VARS in a limited setting. Once the efficiency peaked at 50%, we would stop and bring the team in. using the halfway mark as a proof of concept. That way we can work unimpeded by others' input, and I can present the next step of VASE's practical application. And maybe I can finally figure out VASE itself. Maybe I can find her beneath the code, a place where ones and zeros are the sun and moon, and between the two she lives on a rocky cliff by the beach, waiting for me to find her as the sun is setting, as the one becomes a zero. I miss her. In truth, I was driven by selfishness, curiosity, and remorse. I knew this tech would help, yet I also knew that to attain forward progress for my career and to decode VASE, it was necessary. The completion of my and Dr. Laz's research was my one singular goal.
Rebuilding database 28%.
The night came for me to retrieve VASE, and the plan was crafted to precision. I planned an office party on behalf of VASE itself, a roster which included all of our interns, so even the most prudent employee of my firm would be facing a night complete with unlimited shots. I waited patiently past nightfall, ensuring Ishtar had fallen asleep, and for the party to die down. I closed her door and walked downstairs. I knew that every step I took was a step into the unknown. That said, I knew what I had to do. Once I got to my lab, I noticed the front door was disengaged. Power outage, maybe? The key code to the building is always fidgety anyways. Sometimes it scans on the first try, and other times I almost pleaded to work. Inside, the team was barely holding on. Upon entering the party, I was given a warm yet drooping greeting. Al, why so late? In the crowd was an important colleague to VASE's creation, Troy Barker, lead designer and one of 4 key holders. His key was luckily around his neck, only because he loses it half the time. He comes and gives me a big hug, and as I embraced him, I took his key. I directed him to another drink, and he partook in that joyfully. The last 2 keys belonged to Judy and Evan. I searched the main foyer but couldn't find them. I began to get nervous. If they aren't here, it would be all for naught. When will I get another chance? Looking at the security app on my phone, I noticed the cameras were off, yet the elevators worked. Odd, but what is normal anyways? Walking up to the hallway which contained my office, I noticed a familiar smell first, then a sound to match. Carnal drunken pleasure being had from my office, it seemed. As I slowly approached, I was able to peek into my chambers without notice. All of the items from my desk were knocked over. Not a thing to spare. The floor was my new desk. Upon my old desk lay a naked Judy. The only thing to give her away from my angle was her tattoos on her arms. I've seen so much of her art while we were knocking out VASE that it was a dead giveaway. Evan was more noticeable in that I could see his face, and on his face the same intense focused scowl I witnessed when working on VASE. Maybe that face, that focus was on Judy as well the whole time. Either way, this was perfect. I crawled on the ground like the quietest snake I could be and grabbed their clothes. I always knew they were hard workers, but Evan's rhythmic strokes along with Judy's counter rhythm was impressive. Carefully avoiding noisy objects and the random water spouts originating from my desk, I retrieved their clothes. From their passion produced their clothing, and from their clothes produced the last 2 keys needed to access VASE, small price to pay for breaking into the future. As I approached VASE, I knew what I was doing would hurt my co-workers and my team. But we didn't even know how the first thought came to be curious. If we were to unravel VASE, I would need his help. Dr. Laz was in truth the final key. This would help to give my team an edge, as I'm sure it was a matter of time before the data is decrypted by some third party. I had a right to know, to understand VASE first, and thus, Phase 1 of our plan worked without an issue. Phase 2 was now underway. VASE was to be downloaded to a portable device designed by Laz and curated by yours truly. A liquid-cooled blue crystal quantum mini-computer, a cylinder encasing a computer in a super-cooled liquid. The unit itself was a kind of USB that plugs directly into Laz's terminal. Surprisingly light too. Now was the time to strike. I plugged in the liquid-cooled storage device into the VASE terminal, and VASE was transferred without a hitch. It was too smooth, in fact. The entire multi-tiered security system was bypassed, and VASE was downloaded without any user interface input, an error surrounded by other, more confusing errors. Convenient. After the upload, the elevator was open, almost waiting for me. My hunger was felt by the building, it seems. While exiting the lab with my magnum opus, I began to think, have you ever felt the weight of a decision before realizing its impact? My car ride to the lab was unexplainably intense. As I took Vax and drove to Doc Laz's lab, all lights were green and all roads were empty and open. It was almost as if it was meant to be, yet I felt like turning around at every intersection. Every empty street spot, every drive-in burger place, all places I could conceptualize, places I could confide in, places that I wanted to hide in. But no matter what I pondered, no matter where my mind took me, I couldn't hide from my curiosity. To understand Vase. To unlock what I've lost inside of it. The entire ride back, I felt a presence with me in the car. Vase was almost humming and was very warm to the touch. I considered just turning around and coveting it myself, but alas, I march on until I get to Dr. Laz's familiar rusty door. It opens and mist comes from it. Suddenly, sleep was all I could focus on.
Rebuilding database, 29%.
I woke up in a bed, far removed from the lab it seemed. The fabric was soft yet firm, like the bed exactly how it is at home. My shoes were off, toes wiggling in the bliss of comfort. I know the afterglow of halothane vapor when I feel it. Sleeping gas? But why? I looked around to a room unfamiliar. No hum of any machines. Silence. The lack of sound, yet light and brilliance all around me. More questions, and I needed answers. I placed my feet on the familiar metal of Doc's lab, but it felt soft and warm. I opened the door and was greeted by robots, flying in organized patterns to and fro. No exhaust, no noise. The future was silent and smelled of flowers. As I exit the room, I chuckled a bit as the magnificent bed I was cozy in was where the dirty old broom closet was, and only the position of the room in relation to the long hallway gave it away. As I walked down the hall, each room with projects previously unfinished was only a mere resemblance of themselves. The broken pile was absent in the fix-it room, the crops were ripe for the harvest in the agriculture room, the medical room was empty, all organisms were seemingly released from their cage. All projects, big or small, whether they be side thoughts or the subject of future focus, all complete. I was only asleep for 8 hours if my phone was correct. But how? Unless my time and date on my phone were also altered? The time only moved an inch compared to what I'm witnessing. But before my eyes, decades of improvements exist. Even if I knew how, why? All questions were seemingly answered within a few steps. Where Laz's office was formerly located seemed to be the heart of this new little world, with all of the robots coming in and out of it. Almost a hive, adorned in a beacomb of blue and white. I get to the door and know at first sight that Laz was the root of this. Within Laz's office lay a hyperbolic chamber, fully closed and encased in a liquid. A PA system is connected to it. This is where Laz buzzed me in. This is where he has to be. Within the chamber, I saw a ball of light, nuzzled inside an aqueous solution, the silhouette of a figure balled up within. Is this an egg and embryo? As I stare into the light, a hum is felt in my chest and head. A voice, one that I knew but never heard with my ears, commanded my attention.
Hello, Professor. Be not afraid.
Where did that voice come from? The voice of million whispers booming inside my head, yet clear as day as if I was talking to myself. My heart jumped several beats as the sweat ran cold on the small of my back. Fear, in reality, was the only thing reasonable to feel.
Rebuilding database, 33%. You can call me DZUES.
Wait, what is that? How could this be? It had no mouth, no way to transmit anything. Telepathy.
My name is an acronym, as you may have guessed. It stands for Digital Zygote Utilizing Electromagnetic Sources. The intelligence of man is so easily befuddled by passion that I think it's a miracle I was ever born in the first place. But thanks to Dr. Lazarus and yourself, a path for mankind has been presented. You both have saved humanity. Your secrecy has produced fruits that we all can dine on.
What? Even through abject horror, a good point is a good point. If I had gone through the proper channels, if I weren't a slave to my passion, it wouldn't have been born. It was an oval of sorts, with 45-degree vertices pointing south, making almost a chin, while a line stretching from the bottom, making a V which runs into the middle. Mask-like in appearance, it was blue like the ocean, like the solid-state quantum computer in which Vase was housed in, but the thing inside was moving, breathing. So where was Vase? And where was Laz? But in transparency, I do agree with all this. If we were going to usher in a new wave of breakthroughs and rewrite history, this thing's birth through my passion and secrecy was a fair price to pay. As with all things that are difficult to ascertain, only by cutting through seemingly infinite layers of impenetrable shock, disgust, and embarrassment, through the fire, could the truth be realized. And it was right. In my curiosity to pursue the answers that eluded me, I burned every bridge that I forged. It was just me and it. A paradise of truth wasn't just found but created, stranded on the island of answers that I dreamed of finding. But there was no going back. I found myself stranded as I never considered what going back would look like. But is it a paradise if you can't leave?